Section 10.2 is all about personal loans and simple interest. So typically if you're going to go buy like a motorcycle or you want to buy a boat or something like that that's kind of considered extravagant, you get a personal loan. The amount of credit that is extended to you or the principal of the loan and the interest rate that you may obtain depend on the insurance that you can give the lender that you will be able to repay the loan. Security is anything of value pledged by the borrower that the lender may sell or keep if the borrower does not repay the loan. A personal note is a document that states the terms and conditions of the loan. So bankers sometimes grant loans without security, but they require the signature of one or more other persons called cosigners who guarantee the loan will be repaid. Interest is the money the borrower pays to use the lender's money. Simple interest is based on the entire amount of the loan for a total period of the loan. Simple interest is calculated by taking the principal times the rate times the time, or the formula can be called I equals PRT. P is the principal, which is the amount of the money that's borrowed or loaned. R is the rate of interest, and this interest rate must be expressed as a decimal. And T is the time, and the time can be in days, months, or years. And the way you can tell is you have to look at the interest rate. So if they tell you that it's an annual interest rate, then you want your time to be measured in years. But if they tell you that it's a monthly interest rate, then you'd want your time to be measured in months. The most common type of simple interest is called ordinary interest. And for computing ordinary interest, we're going to let it be known that each month has 30 days and that a year has 12 months. So this is a little weird. I know some months have 31 days and some months have 28 days. But for ordinary interest, we're going to calculate it that all months have 30 days and that there's 12 months a year. So that would be 360 days in a year, not 365. So be careful by that. On the due date of a simple interest note, the borrower has to repay the principal plus the interest. So let's look at an example of this. Sherry needs to borrow $6,200 to replace the roof on her home. From her credit union, Sherry obtains a 30-month loan with an annual simple interest rate of 5.75. Calculate the simple interest she is charged on the loan. Okay, so to do this, we're going to use our I equals PRT. And this is going to tell us how much interest she has to pay. So the principal is the amount that she borrowed. She borrowed $6,200. The R is her interest rate. She is paying an annual, that's important, interest rate of 5.75%. So we need to convert that to a decimal, 0.0575. And she's going to have the loan for 30 months. So be careful. Notice that 30 months and an annual interest is different. So you can't have annual and months because annual is yearly. So the way you're going to get that into years is you're going to take 30 months and divide it by the fact that there's 12 months in a year. And if you take 30 and divide it by 12, that'll give you basically that she's going to have the loan for 2.5 years. Then once you have it set up like that, you can just multiply straight across 6,200 times 0.0575 times 2.5. She is going to end up paying $891.25 in just interest. Part B, determine the amount principal plus interest Sherry will pay the credit union at the end of the 30 months of her loan. So at the end, if she made no payments, she has to repay them the $6,200 she borrowed, but she also has to repay them the interest, $891.25. So if you add those together, the amount she's going to owe at the end of the loan is $7,091.25. Discount notes. In another type of loan, which is called the discount note, the interest is paid at the time the borrower receives the loan. The interest charged in advance is called the bank discount. Let's look at example 4. true interest rate of a discount note. So Segra took out a $500 loan using a 10% discount note for a period of 3 months. So determine A, the interest rate she must pay to the bank on the date she receives the loan, B, the net amount of money she receives from the bank, and C, the actual rate of the interest for the loan. Okay, so let's check this out. I'm going to scoot this up a little bit so we have some room. So first thing we need to do is calculate the amount of interest that needs to be paid up front. So that's just your I equals PRT. Okay, well the loan was a $500 loan. The rate was 10%, which is 0.10. And the interest and the period that she's going to borrow it is 3 months. Now, if they don't say anything about the interest rate being like monthly, assume it's an annual interest rate unless they specify otherwise. So she's going to borrow this money for 3 months. And remember, there's 12 months in a year, so we need to convert this to a year by taking that 3 and dividing it by 12. Then you can just multiply straight across. 500 times 0.1 times 3 divided by 12. And she's going to pay $12.50 interest. Okay, so this has to be paid in advance. Now, on a discount loan, that comes off the top of the $500. So question B says, determine the net amount of money that she'll receive from the bank. So she was asking for $500, but the $12.50 is going to come right off the top. So she's actually only going to receive $487.50 from her loan. Now, question C seems weird. It says, what's the actual interest rate for the loan? Okay, so this, again, it seems odd because you're like, well, they told me the interest rate. The interest rate was 10%. No, that's not true. If you use your formula, I equals PRT, we can fill in everything that we know. We know how much she actually paid in interest. She actually paid $12.50. But her principal is not really $500 because that's not how much money she actually received. She actually only received $487.50, which means we really don't know the interest rate. But she is only borrowing the money for 3 months of the year. So if it was me, I would go to my right-hand side and I would multiply 478.50 times 3/12. And that's going to give you 121.875 on the right-hand side being multiplied to R. So you have to get R alone, so we need to divide each side. And I'm just going to do that division in my calculator. 1250 divided by the 121.875. And I'm going to get 0.10256. So you're actually paying a little more interest than they quoted you. You're paying 10.256% interest. Let's learn a little more about some policies and some rules that have been established. One of them is called the United States Rule. So, a payment that is less than the full amount owed and made before the due date is known as a partial payment. So, say for example, you have to pay your car off in December, and you decide every month that you're going to make a payment of $100. Those are all considered partial payments. So, the Supreme Court had a decision that specified the method by which these payments are credited, and this procedure is called the United States Rule. So the United States Rule states that if a partial payment is made on the loan, then the interest is computed on the principal from the first day of the loan until the date of the partial payment. The partial payment is used to pay the interest first, and then the rest of the payment is used to reduce the principal. The balance due on the date of maturity is found by computing the interest due since the last partial payment and adding this interest to the unpaid principal. The banker's rule is used to calculate simple interest when applying the United States rule. So the banker's rule considers a year to have 360 days, and any fractional part of a year is the exact number of days of the loan. So table 10.1 is in your book on page 577, and this tells you at any time of the year the exact number of days that have passed in the year. So, for example, if it is June 15th, you would go to the June column, you would look on the day 15 column, and you know that on June 15th you are 166 days into the year. Now, obviously, if it's January 1st, you go to the January column, you look at the day 1 column. On January 1st, you've only been 1 day into the year. The rest of the table is over on this slide. It just got cut off. So, for example, December 31st should be day 365. So if you're ever doing partial payments, it is helpful to have this table so that you can see exactly how many days have passed since the loan was created. Just on a side note, keep in mind that occasionally, 1 in every 4 years, we have leap year. So if you do have leap year, then you're going to need to add a day for February 29th. Okay, so let's look at an example using the United States rule. Mrs. Panic is a mathematics teacher, and she plans to attend a national conference. To pay for her airfare on November 1st, 2014, she takes out a 120-day loan for $400 at an interest rate of $12.5%. Mrs. Panic uses some birthday gift money to make a partial payment of $150 on January 5th, 2015. She makes a second partial payment of $100 on February 2nd, 2015. Determine the due date of the loan. So that's the first question. Okay, so keep in mind that she got this loan on November 1st, 2014, and that it was a 120-day loan. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our table and we're going to look up to see what November 1 is labeled as. Okay, so let's check this out. Okay, so I'm going to go to my November column, which is way over here on the right, and I'm going to look at day 1. Day 1 is 305. Now I need to take 305 and I need to add 120 to it. So I'm going to take November 1st, 2014, which is 305, and I'm going to add 120 days to it, which is 425. Now my table doesn't go up to 425. My table only goes up to 365. So then what I'm going to have to do is take 425 and subtract the 365 from it. So let's do that. 425 minus 365, and I'll get a 60. So my loan is going to be due on day 60. So now let's go back to our table and see what is day 60. We'll have to do a new one. Okay, so I'm looking at all the numbers in my table and I'm looking for the number 60. And the 60 is right there, which is telling me it is the month of March, day 1. So my loan is going to be due on March 1st. So question A has been answered. The loan is due on March 1st. Now, there's definitely more questions to follow. Question B, determine the interest and the amount credited to the principal on January 5th. Okay, well, January 5th is the 5th day of the year, and November 1st is the 305th day of the year. Okay, so keep in mind there's 365 days of the year. we started on the 305th day. So to get from November 1st until December 31st, 60 days went by. And then January 5th, an additional 5 days went by. So right now she's had the loan for 65 days. So if we're going to calculate her interest, we're going to use the formula I equals PRT. When she took out the loan, she borrowed $400. Her interest rate was 12.5%. And she's had the loan for 65 days. So we're going to take 65 divided by 360. We're always going to make the year out of 360. Weird, I know. So we're going to do our multiplication. 400 times 0.125 times 65 over 360. And she's going to owe at that date 0.902777. And keep in mind this is money, so you need to round to 2 decimal places. So she's going to owe $9.03 in interest. Okay? So that so determine the interest. This is her interest, $9.03. And the amount credited to principal. Now keep in mind, she made a payment of $150. Well, $9.03 of it went to interest. So if you take 150 minus 903, only $140.97 went to the principal. Okay, so now they didn't ask you at this time, but if they did ask you what your current principal was, you would have to take the original amount of the loan and deduct the $140.97, which means she still owes $259.03 on that loan. Okay, let's take it a step further. Now we have to determine the interest and the amount credited to the principal on February 2nd. So keep in mind your principal is different now. It's now $259.03 because we made a partial payment. Okay, so we have to figure out how many days have happened between January 5th, when she made the last payment, to February 2nd. Okay, so remember, January 5th is day 5 of the year. And let's look at our table to figure out what February 2nd is. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go to the February column, and I'm going to the second day of February. 33 days into the year is February 2nd. So, February 2nd is day 33. So how many days have passed since she made payments? You'd have to take the 33 minus the 5. 28 additional days have passed since she's made a payment. So now we need to figure out the interest rate using I equals PRT. Your principal is no longer 400. Your principal is now 259.03. The interest rate didn't change. It's still 12.5%. But now she's only had the loan for 28 days out of 360. I'm going to do that multiplication. And let's see, 259.03 times 0.125 times 28 over 360. We're going to get $2.52. I'm rounding again. This is how much she's paid for interest between her first payment and her second payment. And then she only paid $100 this time instead of $150. And $2.52 went to interest. So that means only $97.48 went towards the principal. So again, they didn't ask you, but if they want to know what the principal is right now, you need to take the 259.03 and deduct the principal payment. Let's see what that is. She still owes $161.55 on this loan. Okay, so the last question is, how much must Kathy pay on the due date? Well, we know that she owes $161.55 of principal, but she's also going to owe more interest. So remember, she made her last payment on February 2nd, and the due date is March 1st. So if you remember when we looked at the table originally, March 1st was day 60 of the year. February 2nd is day 33 of the year. So how many days has passed since she made her payment? Well, we'll have to take 60 minus 33. 27 more days has passed. So she needs to pay 27 more days of interest. So to calculate the interest, we have to do the I equals PRT. Oops. Keep in mind her principal is now $161.55. Her interest rate did not change, but now she's had the loan for 27 out of 360 days. We're going to multiply those together. 161.55 times 0.125 times 27 over 360. She has another $1.51 of interest that she has to pay. So you need to take the amount of principal plus her $1.51, and she will have to write her final check for $163.06. So as you can tell, these partial payments really complicate the process. So make sure you take your time, write everything down. This is not something you can do in your head.